Hello. First of all, we apologize for not to be present at the conference, but as you know, global pandemic and economical situation are very complicated right now. Also, we want to thank Luan and Karen for an invitation to participate of this tribute to Mary. It's very important for us. The Shadow of Mary Beaudry in Antarctic Archaeology. Toronto's SEH 2009. I was talking with some friends at the party of the Congress when a very friendly lady approached me and told me that she had really liked the work I present. It is difficult to explain my reaction when I realized that it was Mary Beaudry who was speaking to me. Mary was one of the fundamental theoretical reference for all of us who were interested in historical archaeology in the 1990s. I still remember the impact of her book, Documentary Archaeology in the New World, when I first read it. I was surprised that instead of talking about archaeology, she told me about her musical taste, special Caribbean rhythms. It didn't take long, and I was on the floor dancing with her. During my career, I had met many important archaeologists, such Binford, Hodder, Deegan, Dietz, among others. And no matter how friendly they were, I would never imagine them dancing with the skill, rhythm, and the grace that Mary had. From that moment, a friendship and mutual affection began, with several trips of Mary to Brazil that I will keep as a nice memories forever.
During the last year of my master's degree in Brazil, Professor Zarankin had invited Mary to spend some days at the university to give a short seminar. Among other activities, he thought it would be a good idea for his students to present their research to Mary in order to have a feedback from her. For someone who had worked with archaeology of food and considered Mary's work as one of her most important influences, I was very nervous. After hearing my presentation, she told me that she had really enjoyed it. I could not be happier. After that, and during her time in Brazil, we continued exchanging ideas, and I had the chance to get to know Mary better. Years later, I went to Boston, where I was warmly received by her. Not only we continued interchanging ideas about academia and a wide variety of things, but also she presented me the city and its history. I also had the chance to discover her love for the Red Sox. With Mary, every activity, every class, every conversation was exciting and interesting. I am very thankful of having the chance to meet her.
With these short stories, we want to celebrate, first of all, the human and humble side of Mary that is quite rare in our academic universe so full of egos. Without a doubt, Mary was an exceptional person with an inspiring and energetic spirit, and also with a unique sense of humor. Through our interaction with her, we interchanged ideas and perspective. She was always happy to share her experience and also to listen to ours. Mary was a person always available and ready to help, participate actively, and interact with Latin American archaeologists. As a result of this, she was a consultative member of Vestigios, a journal dedicated to publish Latin American historical archaeology, and where she also published some of her papers. She also participated in short seminars at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in 2010 and 2013, and also other events in Brazil. Secondly, Mary was a fundamental reference as archaeologist, not only because her feminist vision and effort to defend the place of women in our profession, but also because of her interest on recovering daily stories of invisible women, such as the ones who embroidered and baked, or the prostitutes of Boston. That's why, when we were invited to make a contribution in this symposium honoring Mary Beaudry, we felt very glad to have the opportunity to acknowledge the many forms in which we were touched by Mary Beaudry's work and also as a person.
As we said before, we first met Mary Beaudry through her text. By doing this, we discovered a socially committed and innovative approach with which we share several concerns, mainly those related with the social role of archaeology as a science that seeks to democratize the construction of the past. In this presentation, and as a form of honoring her, we will discuss her shadow on the project in which we have been working together with other colleagues during the last decades, the Antarctic Historical Archaeology Project, coordinated by Andrès Zarankin and located in the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. Before I start talking about this project, we would like to briefly contextualize by explaining the Latin American context. It was only during the late 80s that the first researchers within the field started to gain visibility and a methodological and theoretical complexity inside the archaeological research agenda. The early works of North American scholars such as Mark Leon, James Ditt, Charles Orser, and Mary Beaudry, among others, that proposed historical archaeology as the study of the early modern world and the changes that it involved was something that called attention and matched with some of the theoretical approaches that were starting to develop in Latin America. This new definition allowed a more direct connection between the past and the present reality of most of Latin American countries. Latin American archaeologists comprehended that in order to understand their present and deconstruct it, the study of its colonial past and the place and role of each country in the New World System was essential. Also, this new definition acknowledged that this emergence process of the modern world involves several contexts and situations, each of them responding in different ways. Thus, in order to obtain a more comprehensive and global view of this process, it was necessary to study through the particularity of multiple geographic and social settings. Inside this context, and influenced by these ideas, the Antarctic Historical Archaeology Project was created. This is an international project that includes research teams from other countries, such as Argentina, Chile, Australia, and the United States. It originated from the need to understand the process of incorporation of a peripheral territory, such as Antarctica, to the capitalist exploration dynamics. Taking this as a starting point, in the early moments of the project, Andrès Zarankin and Jimena focused in the first human occupations in this continent, which were originated by the sealers group that went there looking for hunting grounds to supply the food and oil markets. The emergence of this market as an organized and systematized industry took place in the first half of the 18th century. This new industry focused mainly in the Canton market in China and later in London, England, and North America. The skins taken from fur seals were sold in different markets, from manufacturing clothes. Meanwhile, the oil taken from different species, especially seal elephants, contributed to meet the demands for lighting, machine lubricants, among others. As the demand of these products increased quickly during the few years of the industry, the need for new hunting territories where higher profit per unit invested could be obtained increased. In a short time, the sealer hunting circuit reached a planetary scale, involving several geographic points. The discovery of Antarctica was intimately associated with this logic. From this discovery during the early 19th century, numerous sealer ships, mainly from the United States and England, went there in order to search hunting grounds for marine mammals. One of the strategies used by these groups involved sending hunting parties to land and to establish campsites that could last hours, days, or months, and involve multiple locations and groups of different sizes. The study of the remains of the campsites has been surveyed and excavated in order to discuss not only the capitalist strategies, but also how they articulated with the everyday life and experience of these groups. As the years went by, the ideas and proposals of Mary Beaudry have been leaving their mark on the way we approach the works in these first Antarctic human occupations. Although there are more in this presentation, we will discuss 4 aspects studied by the project in connection with Mary's proposals: the archaeology of common people and people without history, the document's role in historical archaeology project, intimate economies, and archaeology of food and alimentation. Regarding the first point, one of the first things that was clear and evident was that in the official history of Antarctica, the sealer groups were almost invisible. A simple bibliographic revision or even a simple internet search makes it seem like the sealing period in this continent was not relevant, not only to the construction of an Antarctic history, but also to the construction of a history in the ports where the ships departed. This results in a double invisibilization of the sealer groups. First, of the activity itself, in comparison, for example, with the whaling industry that is widely studied. Second, of the people that were part of the sealing crews. Master narratives made the stories of these people invisible until archaeology, based on approaches such as Mary's, changed the focus of interest of the discipline towards subordinate groups. As her studies on places of subaltern groups such as brothels, households, cotton mills, and farms shows, archaeology has the potential to reach those people's stories through their material remains. As Mary exposed, this is not only possible, but also necessary. To rescue this forgotten voice is our opportunity to tell a richer and more plural history. Although most of people that were part of the sealing crews did not know how to read or write, the documental record of the sealing industry is very heterogeneous and rich. Inside this corpus, there are journals, logbooks, crew lists, among others. Considering Mary's work on the relation of the archaeological evidence and documents, where she states that the integration of these two lines allows to capture both the conscience and the material conditions that form the lived experience of a society, we started to systematically approach different historical sources with an aim to build a dialogue between archaeological and historical evidence. Although this has been the aim in most of the specific researches and works made inside the project, in recent years and led by Dr. Melissa Salerno, we started focusing in some historical resources that were not fully considered by the project, logbooks and more recently, crew list. In the case of logbooks, they offer an insight into the diversity of sealers' exploration and exploitation strategies, as well as into how these people live and work on the South Shetlands. Summing up, establishing comparison between the logbooks and the archaeological record could offer the possibility of finding similarities, disparities, complementarities, and pose new questions and interpretations. It is worth mentioning that the access to this type of document is very complicated for researchers that do not live near the institutions that keep them. In this sense, the institutional support and help that Mary gave us allow us to visit New England's museum and archives in two opportunities. The first one in 2015 and the second in 2017. Thanks to this, we come with a great number of information and documents to develop this line of research. In the case of the crew list and considering the access possibilities, we start examining those from the ships that departed from New London. They are being studied with the aim of discuss the multiple dimensions of sealers' identities. Some researchers have provided general references on the sealing crews who visit the South Shetland, suggesting the presence of people from multiple origins. The first results of this new line of inquiry show that the crews of the sealing vessels that sailed from New London were heterogeneous and cosmopolitan. In accordance with Mary's work in African American context, we acknowledge the need of new insights that stress the necessity to make other people visible, including Black people, women, Indigenous people, among others. Although the project started with the idea of understanding the sealing industry inside the wider context of capitalism, it is also acknowledged that this system is not homogeneous, nor the process that originated. Inside this process, there were different situations where the capitalist practice proved to be more flexible or fluid than is commonly expected. We had the opportunity to deepen this discussion when Mary, along with James Neiman and Kevin Fogel, invite Andrès, Zarankin, Melissa Salerno, and I to participate of their book about intimate economies, edited in the year 2017. The book takes as a starting point the idea that in intimate economy, in contrast to formal capitalists, intimate economies are bound to practice and relationships that foster the encounters, intimacy, and permeable frontiers among nature, people, and things. This concept enabled us to consider the sealing context as presenting some features of peripheral economies that could have existed alongside the formal aspect of capitalism and the intimate dimensions that this means. In our chapter, we discuss specifically how sealers manage to get their food and clothes they consider necessary for survival. Though these two practices, we aim to discuss whether they rely solely on the practices and relationships typically associated with the formal aspects of capitalism on board ships and the Antarctic hunting grounds. As a result of this discussion, We observed that although 19th century sealing was part of a capitalist economy ruled by supply and demand in the global market, by observing how sailors managed to get food and clothes, we were able to observe that sailors' participation at the macro scale of the capitalist system did not shape all of their practices and relationships in only one way. Both formal capitalist exchanges and informal chaining of intimate economy served the sealing industry as a particular moment of its development. The discussion about food was also influenced by Mary's work. During the last years, a research about sealing and food has been developing. In this line of inquiry, the aim was to study how the sealing groups related and incorporated the Antarctic territory through food. This interpretative approach took as one of the starting points the idea that alimentation is not only the ingest of edible substances, but also an activity linked with an identity and culture values of human groups. Thus, it plays an important role and an alternative way to understand modern society from a different perspective. Undoubtedly, the vast work developed by Mary regarding food and alimentation influenced in the way food in Antarctica was studied.
In this very briefly presentation, we try to make clear how special Mary was for all of us. And although she is not longer physically, her shadow will continue to dialogue with those who have the lucky to know her, and with the thousands of persons who in the future will continue to read and admire her academic production. Even in Antarctica, it is common for us to have encounters with her. When smiling, she reminds us that archaeology only makes sense if it helps to build a more inclusive and diverse present. Thank you very much.